The wind blows across the empty sand, carrying the heat of 1,000 suns. In the 6th century, the Arabian Peninsula was a vast and lonely place. It was a land of deep silence and endless horizons. For the people who lived there, survival was a daily struggle against the elements. Life was difficult, but it was in this harsh environment that a story began which would eventually change the entire world. Nature in this part of the world was beautiful but unforgiving. Water was more precious than gold, and the shade of a palm tree was a gift. People lived in small groups, moving from one oasis to another. This isolation created a culture of deep pride and strong family bonds. Without a central government, the desert was ruled by the sun, the stars, and the ancient laws of the tribes. Life was not always peaceful in these sands. Different tribes often fought over resources and honor. A small disagreement could lead to a war that lasted for decades. There was no single law to protect the weak, and the strength of your family was your only safety. It was a time of great poetry and courage, but it was also a time of deep social pain and constant conflict. In the middle of this vast desert sat a city called Mecca. It was a place where two worlds met. Traders brought spices and silk from faraway lands, making the city a busy center of commerce. Mecca was famous because of the Kaaba, a square building that people believed was built by Abraham. It was a neutral ground where even the most bitter enemies could come together for trade. Despite the wealth coming through the trade routes, Mecca had deep problems. The rich grew very powerful while the poor were often forgotten. Widows and orphans had no one to look after them, and the old tribal values of sharing were being replaced by greed. The city was full of people, but many felt lonely and ignored. A deep sense of inequality began to divide the people of the desert. Before we continue into the heart of this story, I want to pause and ask you something. Where are you listening from today? We enjoy hearing from people all over the world. If you appreciate these stories about history and the human spirit, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us tell more stories like this one. Now, let us look at the man who noticed these problems. At that time, the Kaaba was filled with hundreds of statues. People came from across the peninsula to worship different gods and idols. The original message of Abraham had been lost over the centuries. Religion had become a business, and the spiritual focus of the people was scattered. The atmosphere was heavy with tradition, but many felt that something essential was missing from their lives and their hearts. The moral situation was becoming more difficult every year. Social justice was rare, and the powerful families controlled everything. Some traditions were even cruel, and many people felt trapped by the superstitions of the past. There was a quiet hunger for something better, a need for a truth that could unite the people and give them a higher purpose. The world was waiting for a light to guide it. Change was coming, but it would not come from a king or a wealthy merchant. It would come from a man who understood what it meant to be alone. The problems of the city were visible to everyone, but only a few truly felt the weight of them. The stage was set for a major turning point in human history, starting in a small corner of the world that many ignored. A child was born into this world who would one day change the course of history. His name was Muhammad. His early life was marked by great sadness and loss, which shaped his character in profound ways. To understand the leader he became, we must first look at the boy who grew up in the shadow of the Kaaba, surrounded by the challenges and the beauty of Mecca. Muhammad's journey began with a great deal of pain. He was an orphan before he was even born, as his father died while traveling. He was sent to live with a family in the desert to grow up strong and learn the pure language of the nomads. This early connection to the open desert gave him a sense of peace and a deep love for the natural world that stayed with him. Loss followed him throughout his childhood. When he was only 6 years old, his mother passed away. A few years later, he lost his grandfather, who was his primary protector. These early deaths left him under the care of his uncle, Abu Talib. Being an orphan in a society that valued family power was very difficult. He knew exactly what it felt like to be vulnerable and without a home. As he grew into a young man, people in Mecca began to notice something special about him. He was known for his calm nature and his absolute honesty. People started calling him Al-Amin, which means the trustworthy. Even those who disagreed with him later in life admitted that he never told a lie. He was a man who listened more than he spoke, and he always kept his promises. Muhammad began working as a merchant, traveling with caravans to distant lands like Syria. During these long journeys, he saw different cultures and met people of many faiths. He watched how trade worked and how people treated one another. These experiences broadened his mind and made him think about the big questions of life. He saw the beauty of the world, but also the many ways that people suffered. A successful businesswoman named Khadijah heard about Muhammad's honesty and hired him to manage her trade. She was impressed by his character and his intelligence. Although she was older and very wealthy, she saw a depth in him that she had never found in anyone else. She decided to propose marriage to him. This was the beginning of one of the most important and supportive partnerships in the history of the world. Their marriage was filled with deep respect and love. Khadijah was not just a wife, she was his closest friend and advisor. With her support, Muhammad found a stable and happy home life. They had children and built a life of comfort. However, even with this personal success, Muhammad could not ignore the problems he saw in the streets of Mecca. His heart remained heavy with the suffering of others. Despite his happy home, Muhammad felt a growing restlessness inside. He looked at the greed of the merchants and the way the poor were treated. He saw the people praying to idols of stone and wood, and it did not make sense to him. He felt that there must be a greater truth, a single source of life that humans were meant to follow. He began to spend more time alone. He would often walk away from the noise of the city. He watched the sunrise over the mountains and the stars at night. He wondered about the purpose of human existence and the nature of the universe. The busy life of a merchant was no longer enough for him. He needed answers that the marketplace could not provide. He needed to find a way to help his people find their way. Outside of Mecca, there was a mountain called the Mountain of Light. Near the top, there was a small, quiet cave known as Hira. Muhammad began to go there for days at a time. He would bring a little food and water and spend his hours in deep thought and prayer. In the silence of the cave, away from the corruption of the city, he searched for a connection to the divine. The cave of Hira became his sanctuary. It was small, dark, and simple. He sat there for hours, listening to the wind and the silence. He was 40 years old now, a man of maturity and experience. He did not know that his life was about to change forever. He did not know that his time of searching was coming to an end, and his time of leading was about to begin. One night, during the month of Ramadan, the silence in the cave was broken. The air felt different, heavy with a power that Muhammad had never felt before. He was alone, but he suddenly felt a presence that filled the small space. It was a moment that would divide history into before and after. In the darkness of that mountain cave, the first words of a new era were spoken. This night is known as the Night of Power. It was the moment when the heavens opened to the earth. A being of light, the angel Gabriel, appeared before Muhammad. The experience was not gentle. It was overwhelming and intense. The angel commanded him with a single word that would change everything: read. Muhammad, who did not know how to read or write, was confused and deeply afraid. The angel pressed him and repeated the command, read. Muhammad answered again that he could not. The third time, the angel recited the first verses of what would become the Quran. These words spoke of a creator who made man from a small thing and taught him what he did not know. The words felt like they were being written directly onto his heart. The message was clear, powerful, and undeniable. When the angel disappeared, Muhammad was left trembling in the dark. The weight of what had happened was almost too much for a human mind to bear. He ran down the mountain, his heart beating fast. He felt a mixture of awe and absolute terror. He was a simple man who had been given a burden that felt like it could crush a mountain. He needed to find safety. He arrived home and asked his wife, Khadijah, to cover him with a blanket. He was shivering with fear and doubt. He told her what had happened and expressed his fear that he might be losing his mind. But Khadijah, with her wisdom and calm spirit, did not hesitate. She looked at the man she had known for 15 years and told him that a person as good as him could not be harmed. Khadijah reminded him of his character. She told him that he was kind to his family, helped the poor, and always spoke the truth. She believed him immediately. To confirm her feelings, she took him to see her cousin, a wise man who studied ancient scriptures. The old man listened to Muhammad's story and told him that this was the same spirit that had come to Moses long ago. The confirmation from the wise man and the support from his wife gave Muhammad the strength he needed. He realized that he had been chosen for a mission he had never asked for. He was to be a messenger, a bridge between the divine and the people. This realization brought a new kind of peace, but it also brought a sense of great responsibility. The quiet life he knew was gone. For a short time after the first event, the revelations stopped. Muhammad waited in the silence, wondering if he would ever hear the voice again. This period of waiting was a test of his patience and faith. When the words finally returned, they brought more instructions and comfort. He was told to stand up and warn the people, to praise the Creator, and to keep his heart pure. The message was not complicated, but it was revolutionary. It called for the worship of only one God and the end of all idols. It demanded that people treat one another with justice and compassion. It spoke of a day of judgment where every action would matter. For a society built on tribal power and the worship of many gods, these ideas were a direct challenge to the way they lived. At first, Muhammad shared the message only with those he trusted most. His wife was the first to believe, followed by his young cousin Ali and his close friend Abu Bakr. These early followers formed a small circle of support. They met in secret to pray and listen to the new verses. They were bound together by a shared truth that made the dangers of the outside world seem small. As the number of followers grew slowly, the time came for Muhammad to take the message to the public. He stood on a hill in Mecca and called the people together. He asked them if they would believe him if he told them an army was coming. They all said yes, because he never lied. But when he told them about the message from God, many turned away in anger and confusion. The silence was officially over. The message was now in the streets of Mecca, and it was causing a storm. The leaders of the city realized that if this message spread, their power would be at risk. They could not ignore Muhammad any longer. What started as a quiet moment in a mountain cave had now become a public conflict that would test the resolve of everyone involved. The Meccan leaders were not just angry because of the new religion. They were afraid for their business. Mecca was a city of many gods, and pilgrims brought a lot of money to see the idols in the Kaaba. If people stopped believing in those idols, the city would lose its wealth. The message of equality also threatened the social order that kept the elites in power over the common people. Conflict began to grow every day. The powerful families started to mock the followers of Muhammad. They called them poets and madmen. They tried to make the message sound like a joke. However, the message continued to attract the people who had the least to lose: the poor, the slaves, and the young. For them, the idea that all humans were equal before God was a message of hope. When mockery did not work, the leaders turned to cruelty. They began to punish anyone who joined the new faith. One of the most famous examples was a slave named Bilal. His master took him out into the desert and placed a heavy stone on his chest to force him to give up his belief. Despite the pain and the heat, Bilal only repeated one word: one. He meant one God. The story of Bilal's strength inspired many others. It showed that faith could give a person a dignity that no master could take away. Muhammad and his followers faced constant insults and physical attacks. Some were even killed for their beliefs. Yet, remarkably, almost no one left the faith once they had joined. Their belief was not just an idea, it was a transformation of their entire lives. The Meccan leaders tried to make a deal with Muhammad. They offered him wealth, power, and even to make him their king if he would just stop criticizing their idols. Muhammad's answer was famous for its clarity. He said that even if they put the sun in his right hand and the moon in his left, he would not give up his mission. He was not looking for power, he was looking for truth. Because he refused to stop, the tribes of Mecca decided to stop all trade with Muhammad's family. For 3 years, they were forced to live in a dry valley outside the city. They had very little food and water. This was a time of extreme hunger and suffering. Many children and elderly people became sick. It was a test of survival, but the community stayed together, sharing whatever small pieces of bread they had. After 3 years, the boycott finally ended, but a much darker time was coming. This period is known as the Year of Sorrow. Within a few months, Muhammad lost his beloved wife, Khadijah. She had been his greatest support for 25 years. Shortly after, his uncle Abu Talib, who had protected him from the Meccan leaders, also passed away. Muhammad was now more vulnerable than he had ever been. With his protectors gone, the situation in Mecca became impossible. Muhammad decided to travel to a nearby city called Ta'if to see if they would welcome his message. Instead, the people there threw stones at him until he was injured. It was one of the lowest moments of his life. He sat in a garden outside the city, tired and bleeding, and prayed for strength and guidance. He felt the world closing in on him. Even in this dark time, small signs of hope appeared. People from a city to the north, called Yathrib, had heard about Muhammad. They were tired of the constant wars between their own tribes and were looking for a leader who could bring peace. A small group of them met with Muhammad in secret and pledged to protect him. This was the beginning of a plan that would change the history of Arabia. The Meccan leaders finally decided that there was only one solution. They had to kill Muhammad. They came up with a plan where one man from every tribe would strike him at the same time. This way, no single family could be blamed for his death. It seemed like the end was near. But Muhammad had already received news of their plan and was preparing for a dangerous journey. On the night of the planned murder, Muhammad's house was surrounded. However, he had already left in the darkness. He asked his cousin Ali to sleep in his bed to confuse the attackers. While the men waited outside, Muhammad and his friend Abu Bakr slipped out of the city. They were leaving the place where they were born, heading into the unknown desert. The era of Mecca was ending. The journey was full of danger. The Meccans offered a huge reward of 100 camels for anyone who could capture Muhammad. He and Abu Bakr hid in a cave for 3 days while soldiers searched the hills around them. Tradition says that a spider built a web over the entrance and a bird laid eggs there, making the soldiers think no one had entered. They were only inches away from being caught. After the soldiers moved on, Muhammad and Abu Bakr began the long walk to the north. This journey is called the Hijra, or the migration. It was a crossing from a land of persecution to a land of freedom. It was so important that it later became the starting point for the Islamic calendar. They were not just moving to a new city, they were moving toward the birth of a new society. As they approached the city of Yathrib, word spread that the Prophet was arriving. The people were waiting with excitement. When he finally appeared, they sang songs of welcome. Everyone wanted him to stay at their house. To be fair, Muhammad let his camel walk until it stopped of its own choice. Where the camel sat down, he decided to build his new home and a place of prayer. Yathrib was soon renamed Medina, which means the city. Here, Muhammad was no longer just a preacher. He was now a leader and a peacemaker. He faced the difficult task of bringing together different tribes and religious groups. He wrote a document called the Constitution of Medina, which guaranteed rights and religious freedom to everyone in the city. It was an early example of a community built on shared laws. In Medina, the first mosque was built. It was a simple building made of mud bricks and palm trunks. It was not just a place to pray, it was a community center where people discussed their problems, helped the poor, and made decisions together. Life in Medina was humble. The Prophet himself lived in a small room next to the mosque and often went hungry to ensure others had enough to eat. One of the most beautiful aspects of life in Medina was the brotherhood between the locals and the refugees from Mecca. The people of Medina shared their homes, their food, and their land with the newcomers who had arrived with nothing. This spirit of cooperation showed that faith could be stronger than blood. It created a bond that transformed a collection of families into a single, united community. However, the peace was not perfect. The leaders in Mecca were still angry and felt threatened by the growing community in Medina. They began to seize the property that the Muslims had left behind in Mecca. This led to several years of conflict and battles. These were difficult times, as the small community in Medina had to defend itself against much larger and better-equipped armies from the south. The battles were not just about land, they were about the right to exist. In the Battle of Badr, the smaller Muslim force defeated a large Meccan army, which gave the community a sense that they were being protected by a higher power. Later, at the Battle of Uhud, they faced a difficult setback. Through these struggles, The community learned lessons about discipline, patience, and the importance of staying united under pressure. During these years, the message of the Quran continued to be revealed. The verses now focused on how to build a society. They gave instructions on marriage, inheritance, business, and social welfare. The message was becoming a complete way of life. It emphasized that true worship was not just about prayer, but also about how you treated your neighbor and how you conducted yourself in the world. Muhammad's reputation as a fair and wise leader continued to grow. People from all over Arabia began to travel to Medina to meet him. Many were impressed by his humility. He would sit on the ground with the people, work in the fields, and repair his own shoes. He did not act like a king. This accessibility made people feel that the message was for everyone, regardless of their status. A major turning point came with the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Muhammad and his followers tried to visit Mecca for a peaceful pilgrimage, but they were stopped. Instead of fighting, Muhammad agreed to a treaty that seemed unfair to his followers at first. It required them to return home and wait another year. However, this period of peace allowed the message to spread even faster throughout the desert through conversation and trade. The peace did not last forever, as the Meccans eventually broke the treaty. By this time, Muhammad had thousands of followers. He decided it was time to return to the city of his birth. But he did not return with a desire for blood or revenge. He marched toward Mecca with an army of 10,000 men, but his goal was to enter the city peacefully and end the conflict forever. As the army approached, the Meccan leaders realized they could not win. They expected Muhammad to treat them the way they had treated him, with violence and cruelty. But when he entered the city, he declared a general amnesty. He forgave his oldest enemies and told them they were free to go. This act of mercy was so unexpected that it caused many people to join the faith immediately. Muhammad went directly to the Kaaba. He removed the hundreds of idols that had been placed there over the centuries. As the statues were destroyed, he recited the verse, "Truth has come, and falsehood has vanished." The Kaaba was returned to its original purpose as a house dedicated to one God. The center of Arabia was now unified under a single faith and a single leader. With Mecca finally at peace, the message spread across the entire Arabian Peninsula with incredible speed. Tribes that had been fighting for centuries now called each other brothers. The old system of tribal war was replaced by a system of law and brotherhood. Muhammad returned to Medina, which remained the administrative capital of the new community, but Mecca became the spiritual heart where everyone turned to pray. In the 10th year after the migration, Muhammad performed his final pilgrimage to Mecca. Over 100,000 people joined him. On a plain called Arafat, he delivered his final sermon. He told the people that all humans are equal, regardless of their race or social class. He told them to be kind to women and to protect the rights of the weak. His mission was nearly complete. Shortly after returning to Medina from his final pilgrimage, Muhammad fell ill. He spent his last days in the home of his wife, Aisha. Even while he was sick, he continued to worry about the welfare of his people. He reminded them to stay true to the Quran and to continue living with justice. At the age of 63, the man who had changed the world passed away quietly. The news of his death was a shock to the community. Some people could not believe he was gone. His close friend Abu Bakr stood before the crowd and reminded them that while Muhammad was a messenger who had passed away, the God he served would never die. This moment helped the community transition from being led by a prophet to being guided by the principles he had left behind. The period that followed is known as the era of the rightly guided caliphs. Leaders like Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali worked to keep the community together and expand its reach. Within a few decades, the Islamic world stretched from the borders of China to the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. It was one of the fastest and most significant expansions in human history, changing the map of the world. As the empire grew, it became more than just a political power. It became a center of knowledge and culture. In cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba, scholars began to collect and translate the wisdom of the ancient Greeks, Persians, and Indians. This was the beginning of the Islamic Golden Age. While Europe was in the Middle Ages, the Islamic world was a place of science, medicine, and philosophy. Muslim scholars made incredible discoveries in mathematics, introducing the concept of zero and developing algebra. In medicine, they built some of the world's first hospitals and wrote textbooks that were used in Europe for hundreds of years. They studied the stars and mapped the oceans. This hunger for knowledge was rooted in the Quran's command to observe the world and use the mind to find truth. The culture of this time was also reflected in its art and architecture. Because the religion avoided statues of people, artists focused on beautiful geometric patterns and calligraphy. They built magnificent mosques with domes and arches that seemed to defy gravity. These buildings were designed to inspire a sense of peace and awe, reminding the visitor of the infinite beauty and order of the universe. The legal system also developed, focusing on rights and ethics. It established rules for fair trade, the protection of property, and the rights of the poor to receive a portion of the community's wealth through charity. These laws helped create a stable environment where different religions and cultures could live together. For many centuries, the Islamic world was a place of relative tolerance and safety for minorities. Trade played a huge role in spreading the culture. Muslim merchants traveled by sea to Southeast Asia and across the Sahara Desert to West Africa. They didn't just bring goods, they brought their values and their way of life. Many people joined the faith because they were impressed by the honesty and the simple message of the traders. This helped Islam become a truly global religion, reaching every corner of the earth. Through all these centuries of growth and change, the core of the story remained the same. It was the story of a man in a cave who was told to read. It was the story of a message that said every human being has a direct connection to the divine. This simple idea had the power to dismantle old empires and build a new civilization based on a shared spiritual identity. Even today, the influence of this history is visible everywhere. We see it in the words we use, the numbers we count with, and the architecture of our cities. But more importantly, we see it in the lives of nearly 2 billion people who follow the 5 pillars of the faith, belief, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage. These practices provide a rhythm to life and a sense of belonging. The concept of the Ummah, or the global community, remains a powerful force. It connects a person in Indonesia with a person in Morocco or America. This sense of unity, which began with the Brotherhood in Medina, continues to bridge gaps of language and culture. It is a reminder that despite our many differences, we can find common ground in shared values and a shared purpose. Looking back at the life of Muhammad, we see a man who faced every human struggle. He knew what it was to be an orphan, to be poor, to lose his children, and to be persecuted. Yet, he never lost his focus on mercy and justice. His character remains the primary model for his followers, showing that true greatness is found in how one treats the most vulnerable members of society. The story of Islam is a story of endurance. It is a narrative of how a small group of people with a powerful idea can overcome the greatest obstacles. It shows that the human spirit is capable of incredible transformation when it is guided by a vision of a better world. From the silent sands of Arabia to the busy cities of the modern era, the journey continues. As we conclude this journey through history, let us reflect on what this story means for us today. It reminds us that change often begins in quiet moments of reflection. It teaches us that honesty and character are the most valuable things a person can own. And it shows us that even in the harshest environments, a seed of hope can grow into a forest that covers the world. The legacy of this story is not just found in books or ancient buildings. It is found in the everyday acts of kindness, the pursuit of knowledge, and the search for justice that millions of people strive for every day. It is a living tradition that continues to evolve while staying rooted in its original message. The values of compassion and community are as relevant now as they were in the 7th century. History is not just a collection of dates and names, it is a mirror that shows us our own potential. The story we have explored today is a testament to the power of belief to shape human destiny. It reminds us that every individual has the capacity to contribute something meaningful to the world. We all have our own mountains to climb and our own caves of reflection to find. To understand the world we live in, we must understand the stories that have shaped our ancestors. The rise of Islam is one of those essential stories. It has influenced science, art, law, and the personal lives of billions. By looking back with a mature and open mind, we can appreciate the complexity and the beauty of the human journey throughout the centuries. Let this story encourage you to think about your own purpose and the values you stand for. Like the merchant in Mecca, we are all searching for truth in a busy and often confusing world. We all face moments where we must choose between the easy path and the right path. The lessons of the past can be a quiet guide as we navigate our own lives. The desert wind still blows, and the stars still shine over the mountains of Mecca. The world has changed in many ways, but the human heart remains the same. We still look for meaning, we still value justice, and we still need the support of a community. The story of Islam is a profound chapter in our shared human history that continues to speak to us today. Thank you for taking the time to explore this narrative with us. It is through understanding our past that we can build a more thoughtful and compassionate future. Every culture and every faith has a story to tell, and each one adds a unique thread to the tapestry of humanity. We hope this journey has provided you with a new perspective on a significant part of our world. As we finish, remember that the most important stories are the ones that move us to be better versions of ourselves. Whether it is through history, science, or personal experience, the search for knowledge is a lifelong adventure. Keep looking for the truth, keep being kind to those around you, and never stop wondering about the world. Until next time, may your journey be filled with peace and understanding.